quanti al Museo delle Culture di Lugano. È un grandissimo piacere aprire la prima serata del ciclo COLLÄCTÏO, Conversazioni d'arte, ideato dalla Fondazione Cultura e Musei, Museo delle Culture di Lugano e Associazione Nelli Fare Arte nel nostro tempo. Il progetto nasce dal desiderio di creare, di offrire uno spazio di dialogo attorno a questa pratica tanto antica quanto attuale che è il collezionare. Oggigiorno, sapete, il rapporto tra il collezionismo privato e le istituzioni museali sono attraversati da nuove trasformazioni normative, culturali, talvolta anche critiche. Questo progetto non intende chiaramente offrire delle risposte definitive o proporre o celebrare dei modelli, ma intendiamo veramente dare voce ai collezionisti come protagonisti di una pratica intellettuale, estetica e culturale anche complessa, che esprime una visione di un mondo e che continua a parlarci ancora oggi. Quindi attraverso un ciclo di conversazioni annuali, 4 per la precisione ogni anno, COLLÄCTÍO intende quindi indagare le motivazioni, le ragioni più profonde, le visioni, le ricerche di ciascuno e evidenziare ogni volta, diciamo, la pluralità, la diversità degli approcci e capire se c'è un potenziale dialogo con i musei. Quindi ecco, COLLÄCTÍO è una piattaforma di dialogo aperta, critica e condivisa, un invito a riflettere tutti quanti insieme su come le collezioni private ancora oggi siano capaci di costruire senso, conoscenza e memoria. Volevo essere molto breve e voglio subito lasciare la parola a Paolo Maiullari, responsabile della ricerca delle attività espositive del Museo delle Culture di Lugano, che converserà questa sera con il nostro primo protagonista, Martin Kurer. Grazie a tutti quanti voi di essere qui e vi auguro un'ottima conversazione.
Grazie Nora, buonasera a tutti anche da parte mia, un saluto a Martin Kurer che è qui con noi questa sera. Martin Kurer, prima di entrare diciamo nello specifico delle domande col collezionista, vorrei brevemente contestualizzare l'esperienza che il museo ha avuto con lui. Martin Kurer è un avvocato specializzato in diritto internazionale, originario di Winterthur, che da qualche anno è di Casa Lugano. Da qualche anno, essendo di Casa Lugano, si è avvicinato anche al Museo delle Culture. Noi l'abbiamo conosciuto circa 4 anni fa, l'abbiamo conosciuto e poi piano piano abbiamo conosciuto anche la sua passione collezionistica e le sue collezioni. E attraverso le sue collezioni l'anno scorso, poi dopo un lavoro che è durato quasi 3 anni, abbiamo realizzato un'esposizione temporanea intitolata The Spirit of Simplicity, di cui qui vi faccio vedere la cover del catalogo e di cui vedete nella slideshow alcune immagini della mostra. Martin Kurer, avete visto 2 sculture, vedete anche qua alcune sculture lignee. Ecco, Martin Kurer ha diversi tipi di collezione, dall'arte tradizionale all'arte contemporanea. L'arte tradizionale, quella che lo appassiona particolarmente, è l'arte tradizionale delle Filippine, della Cordigliera. Lui è riconosciuto oggi, è diciamo il proprietario di quella che può essere considerata la più grande collezione al mondo dell'arte della Cordigliera ed ha avuto una grande fortuna, quella di poter vivere nelle Filippine per alcune decadi e poi conoscere le persone e raccogliere anche delle opere della Cordigliera direttamente sul posto. Però questa esposizione, mentre lavoravamo con lui, non poteva essere ridotta all'arte della Cordigliera delle Filippine, perché questa relazione che lui ha con l'arte è una relazione che va al di là dello sguardo, che va al di là dell'estetica, che entra nella vita quotidiana, nella personalità del collezionista, nella sua esperienza di vita, che è un'esperienza di viaggio, un'esperienza internazionale. Ha vissuto in diverse parti del mondo e lì, in queste parti del mondo dove ha vissuto, si è legato ai luoghi, si è legato alle persone, non ha frequentato soltanto comunità di expat, ha frequentato i locali, ha frequentato eventi tradizionali, ha visto come sono, li ha capiti e si è legato. E lo spirito della semplicità per lui, che è molto contrastante perché va dall'arte contemporanea all'arte tradizionale attraverso delle tradizioni, delle grammatiche completamente diverse, ha un fulcro che ha un'essenza che appunto è legato a questa esperienza, di questa esperienza che stasera vogliamo parlare, ed è per quello che abbiamo parlato di simplicity anche questa sera, perché è una sorta di progetto di vita. Quindi adesso inizierei con una domanda. Martin ha introduced, sì scusate, parleremo in inglese con Martin, che capisce l'italiano, lo parla un pochettino, ma visto anche il tema che è un po' complesso, faremo questa conversazione in inglese. Poi se ci saranno delle domande, delle necessarie traduzione, Nora o io tradurremo senza nessun problema al pubblico. Okay, Martin, so thank you for being here with us. It's a pleasure. We meet often after the exhibition project we just closed last year. And now I introduce to the public the relation between you, the museum, the work we did, your collection. So your collection is eclectic, but it has a focus, which is simplicity. But before coming to simplicity, I will make a step back and ask you something more easy. So tell us about how your passion for collecting started. And I remember you telling me about something very interesting. You did not buy your first work, but you earned it. So how did you earn it? When did it start? And how this experience then shaped your way of looking at art and having the idea of starting collecting art?
Well, thanks for the introduction and thanks for coming. And first, if I just can say that I apologize for not speaking Italian. I mean, my Italian is good enough, I believe, to survive well in Lugano, but not for a serious discussion. And the second thing, I mean, Paolo, you experienced that sometimes I like to make a little bit provocative comments, and they are not meant to be offensive. They are just meant to be provocative, because I don't take, I think, myself and what I'm doing as seriously as maybe others would. Yeah, the story is actually very simple. I was attending school, the gymnasium, we'll call it, in a boarding school, at the boarding school in Austria, and we had an art and design professor there, Professor Profeld, who was very impressive to me. You know, I always look up to impressive people. They influence me a lot, and around them I want to show the best of what I can do. You know, so when I thought, well, what he is doing is really very valuable, I wanted to be good in his class. And so he also observed that, and one day, I think I was about 15, 16 years old, he said, you know, I'm involved in an exhibition here of then Yugoslavian artist, but we need someone to protect it, or I mean, to be there, and in your free time on Wednesday afternoon, could you do that during that exhibition? And I said, oh, you know, I was happy, obviously, and then at the end of the exhibition, he asked me, do you want to be paid, or you can have one of those etchings this artist did for free? And since it's not here. Maybe it will come later again here. And so I've chosen that. In the meantime, I've spent a lot of time in that gallery, and became very familiar with the stuff. And so I chose that, and it's still in our house in Winterthur, where my wife lives. It's still hanging there, and that was the start. I got it for work. I can't claim it was hard work, but I was sitting there and making sure that nobody would take anything, and occasionally explaining some things. So that's how it started. But it was really very much influenced by this professor who was teaching us art and design.
And then it continued with contemporary art, or Filipino came immediately? How does it was in your trajectory?
Philippine art came much later, at that time. I then had to go through the professional formation, everything, and I was fairly quickly traveling a lot for foreign clients. I was working for a law firm which was focusing on clients from the States and parts of Asia, and so I got into touch with other cultures also through that. And since my wife is a medical doctor, she had, at that time, we were still young, and at that time medical doctors were really working like slaves, so she wouldn't miss me if I stayed part of the weekend also in New York or Boston or LA, and because she had to work anyway, and I used my free time to go to galleries there, and that's when the collecting activity really started, when I started to have money, when I started to earn. And I usually spent my disposable money on art, and that was contemporary art. At that time, I had no clue of tribal art. That came much later when we moved actually to the Philippines. It was early 90s. And initially I just had decorative stuff, mostly from the south, from the Muslim south in the Philippines, in the house. And then the Cordigliera art came in much later, about 12 or so years ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay, before going into the Cordigliera arts, I would like to ask you, we saw the images here that you are showing, and we already spoke about the difference of eclecticity. This is the painting, maybe. I think this is...
No, this is etching, just passed away. Okay. So, it's, okay.
Please.
You go ahead. This one is not really simple, it's just... you will come. I mean, I think this is your next point then anyway, is it?
Okay. So the question would be now about simplicity. Simplicity, when we started to work with you, we were surprised at the beginning because we saw how simplicity is the focal point. It was a focal point for your collection, contemporary, traditional, but then working together for so long, we understood that simplicity, it's more than something aesthetic. That simplicity, it's something, okay, you value very much, but in life and not only in art. So simplicity, it's a thread of your collection, but if you would define what is for you simplicity, so is it a form of aesthetic, a form of personality, a form of looking at things, doing at things, a form of working, because as a lawyer also things are very complicated. So as you were telling, sometimes simplicity is essential in this. So what is simplicity? What is this essence that connect all your different artworks, but also maybe something more than your artworks.
Yeah, you know, maybe not more. Not all of them I would put into the category of simplicity, because when I bought art, it wasn't really a conscious decision. It was really this decision of my stomach. At the end of the day, I was in a gallery or so, and I saw something, and usually I knew within seconds that this is something which I would like to have coming into my life. And then it was basically an issue of the budget, you know, could I afford it or not? And at that time it was not consciously simple, and not everything, I like to break rules, you know, so even if it was a tacit rule, I didn't always observe it. Let's say the philosophical background of it, I researched only much later. Actually, during COVID time, when I had a lot of time, I was in the initial days. I was in the Philippines in the jungle, and I had a lot of time at hand to do research, and so all those rules. Which I've been living by, I saw the let's say the philosophical or mathematical background only then, like Occam's razor, for instance. I think it's a very important principle. But I've been following that throughout my career, you know. Like, you know, I told you once this example that one of my clients once in a press conference called me the one-armed lawyer, because he said Martin is never saying on the one hand, on the other hand, and so he only has one hand, you know, he's only one solution, or as the solution I would point out everything, but at the end of the day, if they would ask me which one we should take, I think I had a pretty clear picture. Or another Japanese client, they were huge, they still are a huge company, one of the largest in the world, were repetitive clients. And then I remember once we had a discussion about, it was about hundreds, if not $1 billion worth of a transaction. And then Japanese always want to see all the options, and so I told them, you know, we researched that, and these are the options, and so on. Then at the end of the day, the head of the group there, member of the board, who knew me well from before, basically asked, I said, well, you know, what shall we do? And then I said, look, do I know? It is everywhere you have advantages and disadvantages, but my stomach tells me that we should go for that option. And then he just said, we will do that. Dr. Kurer, your stomach is always right. So this is, I think I was more driven in my life by fate and people, impressive people often, than by my brain, let's put it this way. And in art it's not really different. But then, you know, later I saw that there are rules, like when Constantin Brancusi says simplicity is complexity resolved, you know. I think that's a very good statement. Or the Occam's razor, where the rule that if you have different options to solve a problem, go for the most simple solution. Usually it's the best, and I think that's exactly, in a way, the background, the explanation for how I work.
Okay.
Or think, you know, the simplicity, let's say, it's, by the way, not just simplicity as such, you know, simplicity is just one part of it. In my view, it is also repetitiveness, symmetry. Let's say, to put it into one box, clarity in thinking, you know, and that's, I hope, that's how I made my money, and that's how I spent it.
So let's speak now a little bit about your Cordigliera collection. You have the biggest collection in the world of the Cordigliera. You have hundreds of pieces. And I know, because you told me, that you have been offered sometimes to sell your collection or parts of it, but you refuse, so you make everybody sad on the market. But this big collection, is it, you spoke about so much and people, and you went to the Philippines, you stayed for more than 20 years, if I remember correctly. So this big collection is the reflect of a life experience in the Philippines, or has something more to do with your stomach and with the repetitiveness and elements that you can find in Filipino art, which is in fact very, very simple, very symmetrical. How does it work?
No, the whole thing started when I, you know, over time I knew those famous galleries, and then I also made enough money to become a valued client, and so I was also invited to these openings of Art Basel and all the contemporary art exhibits, and my rule was always I would only buy something if I think I will like this piece still, say 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, and so not something which was just passing. And then going there, the contemporary art, and I still have this feeling, it has become so commercial, and nothing lasting, you know. And since I was in the Philippines, you know, I also I was in touch with the primitive art there. I thought maybe that's something different. That's something which will last. And actually, you know, our oldest piece is more than 700 years old. And so that was somehow the start with the Philippine collection, basically replacing contemporary art. Not that I sold it. I only sold, I think, 2 pieces for my contemporary art. And also, right now I'm in the position. You know, I was working, I was partner in law firms. We had the rule was the walls are mine in the whole office. So if you want to have me as a partner, you have to give me the right to decorate the walls. And now that's not the case anymore, so I don't have. And I also, in the Philippines, I lived in a very large house with lots of walls. So I have to somehow sell. I mean, we did a few pieces of the Philippine art. Is it the largest? I don't know. Someone told me somewhere in the vault of the Vatican they have huge numbers of artifacts, including also the Philippines, but they never show anything. I understand.
Let's say the world known biggest, because yours, because in the Vatican maybe.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we don't know what's there, you know. But I just understand. Someone who pretends to know told me it's a very large collection, and then, you know, for me also. The issue was why is it? I think we have about 700 pieces, but fairly often I just had to buy whole collections from heirs of a collector. Even if I didn't, if you had the choice, you know, I would pick X, Y, Z. But sometimes they just said, "Look, you take everything or nothing," you know, and that's why it's such a huge number. Not everything is top quality, but in all of those collections there were top quality pieces, which basically, and don't forget not everything. Actually, the minority of my pieces I bought in the Philippines. They were already out in collections in Europe and Japan, one of the most important collection which I bought was owned by a actually very important Japanese dealer in folk art, or the United States. You know, the United States always had a very close relationship with the Philippines, and they were the first ones really going up to the Cordilleras and being welcomed. You know, the Spanish didn't dare to go up there; they would have come back without the head probably. But the Americans, they could handle these people and did very, very good things for them, education, health, and so on. So the Americans are still very popular up there, and some then just took some pieces back to the States. And, yeah.
But with so many pieces, your collection is complete. You still buy artwork from the Philippines, or you exchange?
I haven't. It's quite a while I've come across something which I was really interested in, which was something extremely special, something which I hadn't seen before. But I think lately what I saw, it wouldn't add anything to the collection.
Okay, we know that you, before working together and doing the exhibition in Lugano, you already had an exhibition in Asia. And you are very concerned with the valorization of the collection, to share, to let people know what is it, how the culture works. And in this regard, you already created a virtual museum. Can you tell us something about it?
Yeah, that was also a COVID baby. You know, you know, essentially, I'm a very private person. For a long time, only now it's called the Martin Kurer collection, because you convinced me, actually, the big Paolo convinced me that I have to do that in order to. Anyway, can you give me?
If you can tell us about the virtual museum.
At the virtual museum.
The valorization.
And what I thought then with I never exhibited anything of my contemporary art before. And then with the Philippine art, I thought, because it's such a big part of what they really have to show, we thought we should do something. We did one in Hong Kong, we did one in Manila, and now here, just to show a different side of the Philippines. Unfortunately, the reputation of the Philippines is not the best. It's known for the corruption. It's known for all the pedophiles going there. It's known for landslides and stuff like that. So it's a little bit too juxtaposition here. And then we had these plans actually with Paolo Maiullari. I had started to discuss about this exhibit already before COVID. And when COVID came, we didn't know when we could do exhibits anymore. And I was there up in the jungle in my house there. And I had thought about it. What shall I do? And that was basically the start of the conception of this virtual museum. I said, well, you know, if we can't travel around anymore, then people can come to a virtual museum, and it's called vimu.org. You should go there. It's a browser-based museum. You can walk around in there. I mean, virtually. Can actually, there are functions when you can talk to other people there if you go in a group, and you can touch, unlike in another traditional museum, you can touch the pieces, you can turn them around in every sense, and so it's rather interesting. And that was basically just because we didn't know when we could travel again.
Magari potremmo continuare ancora, magari lasciamo un momento e poi 2 parole, se ci sono delle domande anche al collezionista che vorreste fare voi.
Grazie mille, Martin. Thank you very much for sharing your collecting practice and your experience. Ci fermiamo qui, almeno per adesso, perché penso che gli spunti siano già molti, estremamente interessanti. Martin Kurer ci ha raccontato della sua collezione, la più importante, la più grande, nota al mondo, che conta oltre 7.000 oggetti, per lo più acquistati, ci ha appena raccontato, fuori dalle Filippine, cosa che ho trovato estremamente interessante. Una collezione, ci ha raccontato, eclettica, perché per l'appunto mette insieme oggetti d'arte tradizionale delle Filippine, dove ha passato oltre 20 anni della sua vita, insieme ad opere d'arte contemporanee. Una collezione quindi eclettica sì, ma anche profondamente coerente, perché ogni oggetto ruota attorno all'idea, è intriso dell'idea, del concetto di semplicità, che per lui, ci ha raccontato, è una chiarezza di visione, una pulizia di pensiero, un'eliminazione del superfluo. Ci ha raccontato del modo in cui sceglie le opere, sempre grazie a questa semplicità che in qualche modo contraddistingue anche la sua vita. Ci ha raccontato del fatto che in pochi secondi sapeva se avrebbe acquistato o meno un'opera, e che ogni volta che acquistava un'opera era proprio quella che era convinto gli sarebbe piaciuto anche 30 anni dopo, ed era quella che era la più semplice. Immagino che la curiosità sia tanta, e alzate pure la mano se avete delle domande, verrò da voi con il microfono.
Yes. Can your collection be seen online? Did you put it online?
Yeah, this is this Vimu, this is this vimu.org, vimu.org. This is the virtual museum. And the whole, only the Cordigliera part is there, not the, well, there is a special exhibition about Philippine modern art, but vimu.org is the website where you can.
Sì, in effetti.
But it doesn't work on iPhone. You need to have a laptop, because the amount of data is huge.
Alcuni anni fa Martin Kurer ha creato un museo virtuale, una piattaforma online che riproduce, no, in qualche modo immersiva, proprio quasi un vero e proprio museo, all'interno del quale ciascuno, entrando, può come muoversi, addirittura toccare gli oggetti. Vimu.org.
Ma non si può sul telefono?
Non si può dal cellulare, soltanto dal computer.
Yes, but have you the address?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Vimu, vimu.org.
I mean, you can see it in the, or should be able.
Venezia.
Cioè V come a seguito.
Come Venezia. Venezia, Imperia, Milano.
You see it here, that's how it looks, but you cannot really watch it here.
Qualche domanda, qualche curiosità per il nostro collezionista?
I mean, you can check it on the iPhone, but you cannot really watch it. But it comes up, vimu.org.
And could you explain some of your art pieces? Or show us more than you show now here?
Here, no, probably the technical.
We have the catalog in case.
Yeah, the catalog. Yeah.
Wish to, you can choose one painting and then we can show to the public, and you can explain why.
I mean, there is not. I mean, let's go to the Cordigliera stuff. I mean, there is. Okay, I can explain that. For instance, this is a collection of so-called hipags, small figures, which the people there were headhunters in the Cordiglieras, the ifugao and Bontoc tribes. And when they started a campaign, they had some beef with a neighboring tribe, because someone had stolen a girl from their tribe or whatever, as it happens there, or some chicken or so. Then they would start a campaign. They would start putting some power in those hipags. The hipags would go into their backpacks, and then they went off with their machetes and the shields, and try to get the heads of their enemies, and then they come back, and 5 years later the other side comes and is going to take their heads. So that's, for instance, something which has a story. It was actually it was a collection put together by an American. In this catalog there are explanations. We also have a book, a more complete catalog, but unfortunately the printing is a little bit lousy. So before they sell it, they have to first check whether it's proper. And there are explanations by a Philippine expert. I'm not an expert. As I said, I'm run by my stomach, not my brain.
Ecco, maybe I can tell 2 words about the collection. Abbiamo l'arte delle Filippine, l'arte tradizionale della Cordigliera. Vedete qui alcune opere di contesto, alcune opere storiche, i bulul messi qui esposti. È l'arte di un popolo che è fortemente legato alla sussistenza, e come elemento fondamentale di sussistenza ha il riso. Quindi le sculture principali, quelle che sono anche più conosciute nel collezionismo dell'arte dell'ifugao, sono quelle che chiamiamo le divinità del riso. Sono delle raffigurazioni, queste figure in coppia o da sole, che sono tenute nel granaio per proteggere il riso e che durante l'anno, in occasione di cerimonie di carattere periodico, sono portate all'esterno e sono attivate affinché proteggano le risaie, affinché garantiscano la prosperità e la sopravvivenza della comunità. Sono sculture che hanno delle forme diverse e delle dimensioni diverse, e le ragioni di queste forme e dimensioni diverse sono diverse anche loro, ossia da un punto di vista formale dipende molto dal linguaggio artistico del popolo. Abbiamo che le ha prodotte, abbiamo delle opere che sono molto più stilizzate, altre sono un po' più tozze, più elaborate, con dei tratti di realismo formale più accentuato, e quindi questo dipende veramente dal linguaggio artistico del popolo. Poi abbiamo invece degli elementi comuni ai bulul, appunto degli ifugao, del popolo ifugao, che sono per esempio le dimensioni. Le dimensioni sono proporzionali alla risaia, quindi se una famiglia aveva una risaia che era su vedete queste risaie che sono su delle pendenze molto molto forti, anche difficili da raggiungere, e sono dei luoghi in cui si lavora in modo molto impegnativo. Se una persona lavorava in una risaia molto ripida, la scultura poteva essere allungata per ricordare questa ripidità. Se invece una persona aveva una risaia, una famiglia magari più benestante, aveva degli spazi più grandi, il bulul proporzionalmente diventava più grande, perché non doveva proteggere 50 metri quadrati di risaia, ma magari 500. E quindi tutto questo, vedete anche come la forma e come la funzione si riflette proprio in una scultura che da una parte ha un valore legato all'identità della cultura e ai canoni suoi, dall'altro invece una concezione ideologica più di area culturale degli ifugao, diffusa, dove questi elementi poi sono trattati, sono rielaborati all'interno della scultura. I bulul sono le opere che, per quanto riguarda l'arte dell'ifugao, sono le opere più importanti, più conosciute, che prima sono arrivate sul mercato e che hanno attirato l'attenzione del collezionismo. Fino a qualche anno fa si vedevano ancora a Parigi al Parcours du Monde dei bulul, molto molto raro vederli. Oggigiorno ormai il collezionismo, grazie anche al nostro collezionista, è quasi completamente esaurito. Però ci sono altre forme espressive, sono gli hipag di cui ha parlato prima Martin, ossia le divinità della guerra, che erano delle sorte anche di amuleti che venivano utilizzati in diversi modi, dalla protezione personale alla richiesta di riscatto, alla protezione, diciamo, nella vita quotidiana, ma anche nella guerra. Il guerriero aveva degli hipag. Tutte queste sculture poi quando venivano attivate, venivano nutrite. E come si nutrono le sculture che poi fanno capo alle divinità in queste culture tradizionali? Si nutrono attraverso dei cibi che sono i cibi delle divinità, come per esempio potrebbe essere la foglia di Betel, oppure si nutrono attraverso dei cibi preziosi, delle sostanze preziose. E una delle sostanze più preziose di tutte è il sangue, quindi il sacrificio animale è importantissimo. In questo caso maiali, cinghiali, ma soprattutto maiali e polli. È importantissimo. Poi un pollo noi andiamo a comprarlo al supermercato o dal contadino, ma il pollo, il maiale, lì sono dei beni preziosissimi, di valore grandissimo, e quindi è un'onorificenza che si fa a favore delle divinità grandissime. Quindi tutto questo sangue che esce dagli animali viene poi spruzzato sulle sculture, che hanno questa sorta di patina che li rende quasi, li fa sembrare quasi delle pietre, perché come ci diceva Martin prima, alcune delle sue sculture al radiocarbonio sono state datate al 1200, al 1300, quindi sono molto antiche. Quindi immaginatevi secoli e secoli di tradizione in cui queste sculture si formano, queste sculture sono tenute nei granai, queste sculture sono esposte agli agenti atmosferici e quindi prendono una vita, una storia che è anche data proprio dal loro utilizzo. Quindi abbiamo questa seconda categoria degli hipag che è meno conosciuta, per poi arrivare a una terza categoria che sono le scatole cerimoniali. Sono queste grandi scatole a forma di elefante, a forma di bucciolo dal corno, a forma di scimmia, a forma di animali che sono diventati anche come delle espressioni di spiriti divini, che sono appunto con i quali ci si allea per proteggersi nella quotidianità. Questo invece è una collezione che praticamente è Martin Kurer che ha costruito e che nessuno prima di lui. Am I right about the collection of the boxes? It's something that you did it first, that this is something specific to the Kurer collection. It's not that there are other collections like this. It's something, I mean, yes, but not so big, not so complete.
People were always focusing on those bululs, on
these are the boxes.
Statues. These are a few of the boxes.
The
Filipinos and so on, they basically were really focusing on that, and they were somehow underestimating in my opinion, the aesthetic value of the boxes. And then let's say the most important part of my collection of boxes I got from this Japanese dealer. What you saw before. The excerpt from the photo
display,
from the display downstairs. That's why, by the way, was the oldest, was about 700, whereas that one is turn of the century. That's already what they call the transition period. That was about the end of the carving. Same. And the boxes, and I immediately was attracted to the boxes because they are so, in a way, so rough, so direct. These people, 100 years ago, their tools were very, very simple. They had their machetes, and so when you carve with them, it's not sophisticated. You cannot. I mean, that is 20th century. Those are spoons which were actually in use, and then you have to make it simple. It's just you reduce. They go to a big tree, fell the tree, and then they carve a sculpture, something out of it with very primitive tools, and that's why they are so rough, and that's why I always liked them. And then there was one other thing which was attractive about it, because the others didn't collect it, they were fairly cheap in relative terms. And now that has totally changed now. dealers of stature are chasing me for a number of pieces which were exhibited here, offering quite substantial sums or large sums for it, because they don't have it. These are most from this Japanese dealer, and the Japanese also have this approach to simplicity, very similar to my approach, to life. So it's no surprise that this guy had collected those. And the good thing is, there is no issue about provenance and something like that, because he was collecting textiles. I mean, it's collecting to sell in his store in Minotoku in Tokyo. And on the occasion of that, he came across of these boxes, and some of them are really extremely interesting. You think you're dealing with a cubist, like this one. You look at this box. They always have two handles. They were used to store this one stuff for ceremonies, but also meat. They were storing in those boxes, and I mean, if you look at that, you think you are dealing with a cubist piece, and far earlier than Cubism, and I don't think that, for instance, Brancusi came across these pieces. I don't think that, because they were not really distributed well in Europe. But it is the same kind of spirit, and the one which I showed to you is about 500 years old. It's an interesting thing, like these we say, I mean, traditionally the primitive people, which in my opinion primitive is not something demeaning, it's something of very high quality, because primitive really means that you live in a simple world, not confused. The complexities in those villages, in the rice terraces, are fairly limited, and that they could basically reduce a piece of wood to a extremely simple sculpture, and that makes it attractive to me. For a long time, the general market didn't realize that. Now they do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Question. Is there any museum in Philippines with something similar as a collection, or not at all?
There are several. There is, first of all, the National Museum in Manila, but the problem is they have never really put the right esteem in relation to the indigenous art. And if any, to the south, the Muslim, but not the north in the mountains. It's changing a little bit, because the current president and his family, they are coming from that area, and the sister of the president, the current president, has opened a museum, which actually it was just recent. I have not seen it yet, but I understand it's okay. The National Museum is, to be honest, it's a shame what they are doing there. Also no boxes, just bululs, and the roof is leaking. It's raining inside. Mm-hmm. And in the Philippines it's raining a lot, so I mean, it's not that these guys are not used to rain, but it's not the way you show your respect. And then there is one museum, but I don't know how many pieces there still are. There was a guy, an American, in the name of George Schenck, who founded the museum there in the ifugao area. But he has sold a lot. I also have a number of pieces from his collection. He used to be one of the collectors. And, you know, the problem is, when I can illustrate that with an anecdote, several years back, 10 years ago, I had a large house in the southern part of Manila, and there I had exhibited a lot of pieces. I had a lot of space for that. And then one day, a cousin of the then president, Ogni was his name, a very powerful, very rich family in the Philippines. They made their money as sugarcane kings. And she came to visit to have a look, and then at the end of the day, that visit, she said, you know, Martin, I'm totally impressed, but why is it always the foreigners who do that? And I said to her, yeah, you know, for us we pay respect, you know, you guys could have done it too. I mean, you have the money, you had always the access to it, and so on. Said, you know, yeah. I mean, the short comment of mine is, well, you have a big collection of Hermes bags, and I have that. Of your culture. Filipinos have a different, a difficult relationship with their own culture in general, and so that's why. But there is actually another Swiss who has a good collection, which is waiting to be published. For the last 10 years, I believe, they are trying to put together a book. And as a Swiss Filipino, so it's a very wealthy family in the Philippines, but he doesn't exhibit it. I don't know why. But yes, I know why, because he's afraid that they would take it. He lives in the Philippines, so he has his collection in the Philippines. And so, yeah, there are a few, but the state really doesn't seem to be show much interest.
C'è un'altra domanda, sì.
Yes, I have a question with regard to simplicity. Does it have a material or spiritual meaning?
I think everything. I think, you know, you can look at the world seeing the complexities of the world. Nowadays, this is the rule that people say when they don't want to explain something. They say, you know, it's so complex, and so, you know, it's so difficult and so to explain, and then they don't explain it. Or other people see through and take the gist of everything, and at the end of the day, I think it's philosophical, it's mathematical. I mean, this rule, this Occam's razor, which I cited before, always go for the most simple solution. This guy was a mathematician, actually a monk, familiar with mathematics. But I think it's also spiritual. If you, personally, you know, for instance, I mean, look at the monks, you know, they are trying to live a very reduced life. Where they are not being distracted by too many things. This is, I mean, which I try to live. I'm not always successful in that, but that is definitely also a spiritual thing, I believe. But I mean, particularly a way of thinking, you know, if I could just, it's an interesting thing if you go and try to reduce everything to the essence.
So I'm curious, you said you have a different professional background, you didn't study art, and you said you buy gut feelings. So I'm curious to know, how did you get to build the competencies or learn whatever is needed to make sure that what you're buying is you're not also just to know that you're not under or overpaying what you're buying, and that's worth it in all senses.
Well, the market for these things was not that big, so probably everything I really liked I overpaid. But I said in the long run it doesn't matter. Either these things, the people will understand that it's something good and then it's worth paying it. To be honest, I don't have the competence to really judge. I had a few advisors. Unfortunately, they're all dead by now. We refer, for instance, one Ramon Villegas. He was an art critic in Manila, the art critic in Manila, in my opinion. By the way, also going back to the issue of simplicity, and he became a good friend. He was advising, and he knew a lot. He had also contact with those ifugaos and so on, which I didn't, because when I was there, this culture didn't really exist anymore. But when he was young, it's still. And I just remember one day we had an appointment for lunch. I went to his gallery, was sitting there amongst all, he had stacks of catalogs and books and everything. And so when he came in, I told him, say, hey, Ramon or Mong, it was his nickname. It said, your interest is really totally wide. You have art books and catalogs about every type of art, and he just says, at the end, it's all the same. And this is true, if you take the essence of art, it's all the same. People want to make it more complex than it is. But I could not give a really learned lecture on the art. I don't know enough about the culture. And then also the other one, a very important advisor who just died about a year ago, actually a month after he finished the texts, is the one who wrote the original version of those texts which you find here. Then it was reworked by Nora, I believe, the text, but his name is Floyd Quintos. And he was extremely familiar with the culture. He was, I think he told me, so this weekend I'm invited to a wedding or whatever, and then he went up there into the mountains. And Floyd Quintos, he wrote, let's say, is it scientific? I'm not so sure. He was a writer. He wrote plays and so, and he was a curator also. But he particularly knew the history. You could show him. I was offered this and this piece. I would ask him, so what do you think about it? He could tell you the whole story. I had the feeling he knew, or at least he pretended to know everything. There are not of the good pieces. Probably there are only about 3,000. There are not that many of the bululs and boxes. I mean, the spoons, obviously there are much more, and the bowls. And he could tell, that was once owned by XYZ, and then it sometimes passed through his hands. He also had a gallery. That was basically the competence, but I don't have. The key issue here is always that you know whether it's genuine or fake, because a lot of those pieces were later copied. There are still carvers up there, but they do the tourist trade, and they were copying it. And here I had the support of one of those carvers who did the fakes. I once invited him to the house, and I said, "Tell me, what do you know about those?" And he said, at the end, said, "Martin, don't worry. I don't know anything of any of those. You can be pretty sure that they are not from the period now." And then before we started exhibiting, we had all of our pieces underwent a C14 test, the carbon test. So we know at least how old the material is, but when you have you have a test, it says 14th century, say, from this, usually it's a range of 30, 50 years, the radiocarbon, then you could look at the style. Does the style match? And then, because these are made from Nara wood. Nara trees don't get old, maybe 50 years. So you can be pretty sure that if it says, let's say it's 14th century, 16th century or so, it is really was carved at that time, because otherwise it wouldn't exist anymore. So, and then you can also see it's always the core of the tree which they have taken.
But it is difficult that a wood sculpture can survive about 500 years. It's quite impossible. In this climate, in Africa, it's not possible. I think a double sculpture is no more older than 300 years, not more.
Well, you have these Telem figures. The Telem
They have not more than 300 years, I do not think.
No, there are also some carbon tests. I do have one, for instance, one Telem from this. Werner Münsterberger, he used to be the director of the Smithsonian, and he did a carbon test, and at that time it was, I think, about 500 years. The issue is what type of wood. Basically all of them, of the old pieces, are Nara, and Nara is an extremely hard wood. I just can tell you, I have my house in the jungle was owned before by someone who had a Nara plantation. So, and he put a beautiful floor in there, made of Nara wood. And this is the only place in the house where the termites absolutely have no chance. They can try to bite that stuff, they will lose their teeth and they can't put the whole. I think that is the reason, and the African stuff is usually not that old, as you're absolutely right, 100, 200 years, because they use a different kind, much softer wood, and then it deteriorates much more quickly. That's what I'm told.
Magari per precisare la cosa, è vero che il clima tropicale è completamente diverso dal nostro, ci sono i terreni acidi, forti piogge, forte sole, però anche i legni robusti come il naro, come l'ironwood, esposti all'esterno, quelli che proprio subiscono tutto, se selezionati bene possono tenere anche più di 3 secoli. Dobbiamo considerare che i bulul non sono esposti all'aperto, sono conservati all'interno, quindi non sono esposti alla pioggia, al sole, ai terreni acidi. Sì, qualcuno ha qualche buchino un po' mangiato e così, perché ci sono state le termiti, ci sono comunque anche degli insetti che riescono ad intaccarlo, però non ci sono degli oggetti che possono resistere molto più a lungo, sono le condizioni di conservazione che sono importanti, non soltanto il tipo di legno o il tipo di clima.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but you have in Indonesia, Dayak, they are all also 500-600 years old, which I think it's a wood like ironwood, which is also ironwood is also something which survives almost everything, and that's absolutely right. What you said, these pieces were the sculptures were so-called rice gods. They had a function in the growing, harvesting, and keeping the rice. So they were used in ceremonies before planting, before harvesting, and then after that they were put into the granaries where they kept what in the Philippines you call the palai, the rice, with still the cover. And they were put in there, and the belief was that they would augment what's in those granaries, that they were able, their spiritual forces would create additional ice in there. That was the idea. And so from this point of view, it's really true. And also these boxes, they had a function inside. They were, I'm told, kept in the houses between the ceremonies and not outside. You saw here one picture but this is a recent picture of a bulul standing outside, but this bulul is a 20th century piece. So one picture in the documentation about and so, but in general they were protected. This one, for instance, I mean, that's not an old piece, you know.
This is just outside for the picture, probably. Okay.
So that one is the C14 says it's 13th century, 13th beginning of 14th century.
Thank you, Martin.
Grazie a tutti, abbiamo finito il tempo per questa sera, grazie infinite Martin Kurer, grazie Paolo Maiullari, grazie a voi per essere stati qua e vi aspettiamo tutti quanti al prossimo incontro tra un paio di settimane, il 12 di febbraio. Grazie e buona serata.